He didn't look dangerous when he held the door for me. That was the trick. People who can ruin you rarely announce themselves. They smile, ask if you're good, and learn your timing before you notice what you've handed over. By the time I realized what Marcus was to me, I'd already moved half my life into the quiet between his messages. We met at the community gym in Cambridge on a Thursday night when most students were buried in labs and late shifts. I came to clear my head for an hour. He was finishing a session with a client. He nodded, like we'd already met in some earlier version of my life. I told myself it was nothing, and stayed longer than usual. When the place thinned out, he asked if I lived nearby. I said yes. He said, "Walk with me." I did. It didn't start with heat. It started with recognition. Marcus spoke like someone who already understood how fear arranges a day. He asked the right questions and left space for answers I hadn't said out loud. I told him I was 21, a transfer student still learning how to be new without disappearing. He told me he was 37, a trainer who'd done other things before this, and didn't miss the noise. We traded cautious truths on the bridge over the river until the cold pushed us apart. He said, "No pressure, only what feels right." I believed him. We kept meeting in public, coffee after my morning class, a short walk near the stadium, a bench behind the rec center, where few people passed. He never asked for more than I could give that day, which somehow made me give more the next time. When he said, almost casually, "I don't want to hide forever," it felt less like a demand and more like a door he'd placed in front of us. I told him I wasn't ready to open it. He nodded like he'd expected that answer and said, "Okay, we'll take our time." The first crack appeared where I didn't think to look. How he avoided certain streets, certain people. He knew everyone and no one, which is a skill if you've practiced being essential without being known. A teammate from my study group spotted us once and asked if Marcus was my coach. Marcus answered before I could. "Mentor," he said, and kept walking. The word stuck. It was safe, but it shrank what we were into something that would fit in public. At home, my phone learned his rhythm. Short check-ins before dawn, a smooth confidence at noon, late messages that felt honest and unguarded. He told me I had good judgment, which sounds small until you've spent years doubting your own. I told him he made things feel possible. He sent a thumbs up and said, "We'll make it simple." Then things stopped being simple. One night, close to midterms, I arrived at the gym later than planned. The lights were still on. Marcus was by the front desk with a man I didn't know, laughing in a way I hadn't heard from him. It wasn't the laughter that hurt. It was the way he looked at the man's shoulder when he touched it, like that was a private language. I froze. Marcus noticed, and for a second his face didn't move at all. Then he flipped the switch I'd never seen. The easy smile, the quick introduction, the breezy line. "Noah, this is an old friend from the Marines." The man waved. I waved back. The moment folded shut like it had never opened. I told myself not to read into it. People are allowed to have friends. Still, when we stepped outside, I asked if there was anything I should know. He said, "Don't start a fire in your head. You and I are good." It sounded practiced. I wanted to believe him. So I did, until the weekend. Saturday afternoon, a classmate sent me a screenshot from a local forum where someone had posted about the new kid who follows a certain trainer around like a shadow. The comments were half jokes, half knives. No names, but the shape of me was there. My classmate added, This you? I stared at the screen until the words went dull. I told Marcus.
He replied 3 minutes later. People talk. It'll pass. It didn't pass. A second thread appeared, sharper, meaner. This time someone went further, hinted at my dorm, my major, the nights I studied late at the library. The details weren't exact, but they were close enough. I asked Marcus if he knew who started it. He said no, then changed the subject. When I pushed, he sent a voice note. You can't let every rumor own you. Keep your head down. Finish your exams. I listened twice, searching for concern and finding strategy instead. On Monday, a friend from the gym texted, Heads up, Marcus has been telling people you're just a kid who needs guidance, says you misread things. I didn't want to believe it. I asked for proof I didn't want to see. Screenshots arrived. The words were his cadence, even if the account was anonymous. Steady, controlled, always sounding reasonable while underselling me by a degree that felt planned. I confronted him behind the rec center, where we used to sit. He didn't flinch. He called the screenshots fake, said people would love to wedge us apart, said the timing near exams wasn't an accident. I asked why he called me a mentee in rooms that didn't include me. He said labels protect people. I asked who exactly they protected. He didn't answer. That night, I stood on the bridge again and tried to measure the cost of silence. Keep it hidden and hope the threads faded. Or say what was true and watch it burn wherever it landed. I didn't decide in that moment. I only knew this. The next time someone tried to name what I was without asking me, I wouldn't nod and play along. I'd use my own voice even if it shook. The week after our argument, Marcus kept his distance. No morning check-ins, no sudden, you free messages. It should have been a relief, but the silence made me restless. Every time my phone lit up, I expected his name.
When it didn't appear, I caught myself scrolling through our old threads, trying to pinpoint the exact message where things shifted. 2 days in, I got a text from an unknown number. Careful who you trust. He's not what you think. No signature, no context. I deleted it, but the words stuck. At the gym, people glanced at me differently. A few nodded, like nothing had changed. Others avoided eye contact. I heard my name in conversations that stopped when I walked past. The tension wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. And I couldn't tell how much of it came from Marcus, how much from me, and how much I was inventing in my head. By Thursday, I decided to confront him again. I found him by the back exit after his shift. He didn't look surprised. We still doing this? He asked. You're the one telling people I misread things, I said. He shook his head. I told people you're young. That's not the same as lying. It is, if you use it to make me look foolish. He stepped closer. You think I'm out here trying to ruin you? I've been covering for you. You don't know how fast people will turn if you give them something to work with. I'm not asking you to cover for me, I said. I'm asking you to stop talking about me like I'm not in the room. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, You want to be open about this? Fine. But you'd better be ready when the fallout starts. The problem was, I didn't know if I was ready. I'd seen what happened to people who were too visible too soon, friends who became cautionary tales, classmates who switched schools because their lives became unlivable. Still, every time I pictured staying quiet, it felt like giving him permission to keep deciding how I was seen. That weekend, I went to a small gathering at a friend's apartment. People I trusted enough to be real with. I told them everything. Not in detail, Not every conversation, but enough. They didn't look shocked. They looked angry on my behalf.
One of them, Jamie said, "If you want this to stop, you have to get ahead of it. Your version has to come from you, not from someone else." The idea scared me, but it made sense. If I didn't control the story, Marcus, or whoever was posting, would keep shaping it. On Monday, I posted a short statement on my private account. Some of you have heard things about me. Some of them are true. Some aren't. I'm not here to convince anyone. But I won't hide from what's real, and I won't let other people tell my story for me. I didn't name Marcus. I didn't need to. Within hours, my DMs filled with messages, some supportive, some curious, a few hostile. A friend sent me a screenshot of Marcus's account where he'd written, "Not everything needs to be public. Some people learn that the hard way." That night, Jamie called to say someone from the gym had reached out to them, asking if I'd turned on Marcus. I realized then how quickly sides form when you stop staying neutral. Marcus texted me later. "So this is the road you're taking?" I replied, "I'm just making sure my voice is part of the conversation." His answer came fast. "Careful, Noah. You don't know how messy this can get." But I did know. I also knew I was done letting the fear of messy keep me quiet. The choice was no longer between peace and conflict. It was between letting someone else decide my place in the world or claiming it myself, no matter who walked away. After that post, the ground shifted fast. People who'd never spoken to me before started acting like they'd been watching the whole thing from the sidelines. Some came forward quietly, saying they'd had their own run-ins with Marcus, stories about subtle digs, strategic rumors, and how he kept people close until they stopped serving a purpose. Others warned me to be careful, which sounded less like concern and more like a reminder that Marcus still held influence. At the gym, the divide was obvious. A few regulars nodded when they saw me, small gestures that felt like quiet votes of confidence. Others kept their distance, even if we'd worked out side by side for months. Marcus didn't acknowledge me at all. He walked past without a glance, which almost felt more pointed than an argument. The online noise grew louder. The original threads about me didn't disappear. They evolved. Now they mixed fact with fiction, splicing in half-true details, meant to keep people guessing. Some comments mocked Marcus directly, which I knew would hit him harder than anything I could say. Jamie suggested I stop reading them altogether. "You can't control what's out there," they said. "You can only control what you do next." What I did next was decide to stop reacting and start moving. I began showing up to the gym during busier hours, making my presence harder to ignore. I didn't confront Marcus, but I also didn't avoid him. If we crossed paths, I'd nod. Not as a peace offering, but as a signal. I'm still here. One night, a mutual acquaintance pulled me aside near the entrance. "He's been telling people you're unstable," they said, "that you're trying to drag him down because you couldn't handle the dynamic." I didn't ask what that word meant in his version. I already knew. It was the same tactic as before, framing me as confused while he stayed calm and reasonable. That conversation cemented something. Staying quiet wasn't going to make this go away. The damage was already in circulation, and every day I left it unchecked was another day his version gained weight. So I reached out to a friend who ran a small local blog that covered community events, sports, and occasionally personal stories when they had a bigger lesson. I pitched mine, not as a scandal, but as a piece about trust, reputation, and how easy it is for one person to rewrite someone else's reality when they hold more power. They agreed, but only if I was willing to attach my name to it. It took a week to work through what I wanted to say. I kept Marcus's name out of it, but included specific examples of how rumors were used to control the narrative. I described the shift in how people treated me, the silence from those who knew better, and the way defending yourself can make you look guilty if the wrong person controls the framing. When the piece went live, the reaction was immediate. Support poured in from people I hadn't seen in years, alongside messages from strangers saying they'd been through similar situations. A few gym members reached out privately to say they believed me but couldn't say so publicly. The article also reached Marcus. He didn't text, but the next time we crossed paths at the gym, he stopped me. "You think this is over now?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "I think it's just not yours to control anymore." His jaw tightened, but he didn't reply. He walked away, and for the first time since this started, I felt the balance shift. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped playing by the rules he'd set. That night, I realized something important. I didn't need everyone to believe me. I just needed enough space to exist without his version swallowing mine. And for the first time in months, that space felt possible. The weeks after the article went public brought a strange calm. Not peace. Marcus still had his circle, and some people had doubled down on their loyalty to him. But the constant edge of panic I'd carried was duller now. I wasn't waiting for the next rumor to drop. If it came, I knew how to meet it. The gym stayed divided. A few people who'd kept their distance before now offered small, quiet support. A nod, a short word in passing. Others pretended I wasn't there, as if acknowledging me might pull them into something they didn't want to be part of. Marcus still avoided direct confrontation, but his absence from certain spaces spoke for him. It was as if he'd redrawn the map of where he could be without crossing paths with me. Then one Friday evening, Jamie sent me a screenshot from another forum. This time, it wasn't speculation. It was a clear defense of Marcus, posted by someone claiming to know the real story. They painted me as a manipulator, twisting events to ruin a man's reputation. It wasn't subtle. The phrasing was clinical, calm, and deliberate. It was the same tone Marcus used when he wanted to appear above the conflict. I showed the screenshot to Jamie. "Do I answer this?" I asked. "Not directly," they said. "He wants you to get pulled back into his framing. Stay where you are. Keep speaking in your own lane." That advice was harder to follow than it sounded. I wanted to respond, to correct every line, but I knew the more I engaged, the easier it would be for Marcus to paint me as obsessed. Instead, I focused on building the life he wasn't part of, more time with people who'd proven they stood with me, more energy into projects that had nothing to do with him. Still, the situation wasn't invisible. A local LGBTQ+ community group reached out after reading the blog piece, asking if I'd join a panel about navigating toxic relationships and reputational harm. It wasn't something I'd ever pictured myself doing, but I agreed. The panel was a turning point. Speaking about my experience in a room full of strangers made the story feel less like a wound and more like a case study, something I could put on the table, examine, and walk away from without losing pieces of myself. I didn't name Marcus, but I didn't hide the dynamics, how trust can be weaponized,
how rumors become currency, how silence protects the wrong people. Afterward, a man in his 40s approached me. "I went through almost the same thing," he said. "The hardest part is realizing some people like the person you're describing too much to believe you. You stop fighting for their approval and start fighting for your own footing." That stayed with me. It reframed everything I'd been doing, not as a war to win, but as a fight to keep standing. The next time I saw Marcus was at the grocery store. We made eye contact across an aisle, and for a second neither of us moved. Then he turned away, without a word. No performance, no pointed silence, just absence. And somehow, that felt like a step forward. Later that night, Jamie said, "You know he's not done. People like that rarely are." "I know," I said, "but I'm not the same person I was when this started. If he tries again, he won't find the same opening." It wasn't defiance for the sake of it. It was recognition. I didn't need to undo what had happened. I needed to be ready for whatever came next without letting it rewrite who I was. The truth was no longer something I hoped people would believe. It was something I carried without apology. And that was more than Marcus could take from me, no matter what stories he told next. Spring came with fewer whispers, not silence. Marcus's version of events still surfaced now and then, but the urgency had faded. People were moving on, finding new topics to pick apart. That shift made it easier to breathe, though it also forced me to face a question I'd been avoiding. What would I do if Marcus tried to circle back? The answer came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I received a short, measured text from him. We should talk. No apology, no explanation, just those 3 words. I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim, then sent back. About what? His reply was almost immediate, clearing the air. For both of us. Jamie warned me it could be a trap, an attempt to draw me into a private exchange he could later twist. But I agreed to meet, choosing a public cafe in the middle of the day. If he wanted to play games, it wouldn't happen in the shadows. When Marcus arrived, he went straight to the point. "Things got out of hand," he said. "We could have handled it better." It sounded diplomatic, but the weight of his phrasing put the blame evenly between us. I told him I wasn't interested in rewriting what happened to make it easier for either of us to digest. "I'm not asking for that," he said. "I just think we can close this without making each other enemies forever." I thought about the months of quiet manipulation, the way he'd shaped my image in spaces I couldn't reach. "We don't have to be enemies," I said, "but I'm not pretending none of it happened." He nodded, though his expression stayed unreadable. "Fair enough. Just maybe we both stop talking about it." That was the moment I realized this meeting wasn't about closure. It was about control. He wanted the subject retired before it could damage him further. I didn't agree or disagree. I simply said, "I'll keep telling my story when it matters. You can decide what you do with yours." We ended the conversation there. No handshake, no false reconciliation. We left the cafe in opposite directions, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look back. In the weeks that followed, I stuck to what I'd promised myself. No chasing his name through forums, no feeding the conflict. Instead, I put my focus on the people and projects that had grown out of this mess. Community events, small writing pieces about resilience, late-night conversations with others who'd been through similar situations. The panel I'd joined months earlier invited me back, this time as the closing speaker for their annual event. I ended my talk
with the same line I'd been repeating to myself since the day I posted my statement. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you, and they'll get it wrong. The applause that followed wasn't about me winning anything over Marcus. It was about surviving the way someone else tried to frame me and refusing to live inside their version. Marcus never contacted me again.
Maybe he decided it wasn't worth the effort. Maybe he moved on to someone else. The difference now was that I didn't care. His opinion no longer had the power to shift my days. The fallout didn't vanish overnight. Some people still saw me through the lens he'd created. But enough saw me as I was, and more importantly, I saw myself without the distortions he'd introduced. That was the real outcome, reclaiming the ability to define my own place, no permission required. In the end, it wasn't about clearing my name for everyone. It was about making sure I never again handed the pen to someone who'd write me out of my own life. That's the part Marcus never understood, and the part he could never take back.